Yeah, I was listening to that song as I was preparing the talk and was working on getting ready for this Sunday, and I just kind of heard that song and went, yeah, that'll work nicely, because we know that to be true in unity. We know about the power of our prayer. We know about how powerful it is to send out those thoughts of love, and how those thoughts of love can just melt away hate. See, unity was founded on the power of prayer. It is deep within the DNA of our creation. From the stories of the healing of our co-founder Myrtle Fillmore when she used the power of affirmative prayer to heal herself from tuberculosis, and then the stories of her husband Charles, who used the power of affirmative prayer to heal his withered leg, and the countless others of us that are sitting in this room and watching on live stream that have used the power of prayer in our lives to make a difference. We know prayer works. That's not the question. The question for us to struggle with isn't, does prayer work? The question we want to look at is, how does prayer work? Why does prayer work? Because here's the thing. When we first start out on this prayer path, when we first begin with this idea of I'm going to set a prayer intention, I'm going to hold to that prayer intention, and I am going to heal my life. And then we start getting results, and we start seeing changes, and we start seeing positive movement. We feel a greater connection to Spirit. It is really, really easy for us to jump from this realm of how the prayer works into this realm of magical thinking. And to think that, you know what, if I just say the right words, if I say them enough times, if I do exactly the right thing, my prayer is going to work out. Right? That's how it works, right? You just say, I am prosperous 100 times a day and everything's good. No, it works just a little bit different than that. You see, the Fillmores knew and taught that these prayers were grounded in divine spiritual laws, unchanging laws that governed the spiritual functioning of the world around us. And when we become aware of those laws and we tap into those laws and we use those laws, then the results, the success, the whatever we want to call it of our prayers, those are assured. You see, it's not magic. It's the outpicturing of spiritual law. It's not magic. It's not because we have the special hidden, what's the word I'm looking for? Special hidden formula to know what it is to say. It's that what we're doing is calling into being the outpicturing of the reality of the world around us. This is the way divine law works. So that's what we're going to explore today. Today we're going to take a look at what those divine laws are, specifically what one of them is. And then we're going to see how that informs our prayer life, how the knowledge of that informs our prayer life. But what we know in unity is that it's more than just, we come, we sit on Sunday, we hear a beautiful meditation, and we move on with our week. Unity is about the practice, as Reverend Erin told us last week. We can applaud, that's okay. We have time. Yeah. The Chiefs don't kick off till noon. We've got about 50 minutes. We can applaud. It's about the practice. It's about the prayer practice. It's about wrestling with these principles. And because unity is practical spirituality, we want to give you experiences of this. So it doesn't just end on Sunday morning. This week is World Day of Prayer, as you've heard. So you can join us right here in the Activities Center at 7 o'clock this Wednesday night for the opening ceremony. At 8:30, the 24-hour prayer vigil begins. Live streamers. You can live stream many of these World Day of Prayer events. If you go to unity.org, you'll be able to see what's coming up, where you can live stream, how you can connect, and which ones are available to live stream. So we have that going on this week. Next week, you can come back and hear me talk again about the power of our thoughts. And then the following Wednesday, we're going to wrap up the Unity Explorers class with a look at prayer and principle. So all of these are ways for you to practice, to really dive in to what it is that we're teaching, and then to take it and put it into your practice at home. Because the power in these principles is that they will change your life. Well, enough about that. Let's get back to this idea that this is not Hogwarts and prayer is not magic. Okay? Prayer is not magic. But it is so easy to make that leap when we don't have the full understanding of it. It's so easy for us to look at an answered prayer and to think that somehow we were the special chosen one, that God reached down from heaven and granted us His grace, and it will never again be repeated. The truth is the complete opposite of that. And the danger that happens when we fall into that line of thinking is that what happens is we start to believe that this was just a special one-time thing. That the healing that I received, it was just the grace of God that gave it to me. And it's not because I am a child of God and I do not inherit sickness. That the financial windfall that came in that allowed me to make it through that gap in my employment wasn't because I am a child of God and I live in a prosperous universe. Well, it was because I just happened to say the right words at the right time and God went, okay, this time. The truth is so much more powerful than that. The truth is that we are connected to one power, one presence in our universe. That presence is God the good. And because we are connected to that presence, it is our divine right to be able to call that good forth into the world. And when we understand the laws that allow that good to come forth, we're able to co-create the world that works for all of us. But it all has to do with how we perceive things. So I want to just show you an example of how our brain can perceive something that it knows is there. And you know, when you see it and your brain says, oh yeah, that's how that works, and then you find out how it's really working, it unlocks a whole new level of understanding for you. So on this side of this card, how many dots are there? One, right? So there's one over here. You all see that? You got one over here, right? I'm going to flip it over. How many do we have now? 4, right? There's 4 dots on this side. Now how many on this side? 3, right? Now 6. So it goes 1, 4, 3, 6. Okay? 1, 4, 3, 6. Are you starting to figure this out here? 1, 4, 3, 6. I'm hearing somebody going, there's 2. You figured it out. You see, the card actually looks like this. But the way your brain works is you're listening to me tell you what's happening here. So I hold it up and I say, there's 1. Your brain sees 1, and I'm a minister, after all, you're supposed to trust me. So you're going to just believe there's 1, right? When I flip it over, I've got this one covered up. And I tell you there's 4. Well, you have no reason not to trust me, and your brain, oh yeah, there's 4 there. Well, now, when I flip it over, I'm covering this up. Your brain fills in this gap. I've told you there's 3. Your brain goes, yeah, there's 3 there. That means he's saying there's 3. And I've seen dominoes before. They go 1, 2, 3. I just can't see it. There's 3. And then the same thing with 6. But when you first see this happen, what's going on is that you're going, it's magic. It doesn't make sense. That card is flipping and the numbers are changing. I don't understand. But then once you know that, well, it's just gaps and I'm just covering things up and I'm flipping it fast enough and I'm playing with your brain, you have a different level of understanding. This is how divine law works. You see, that divine law, that was functioning regardless of whether you were aware of it or not. I was playing with your brain because I knew the way the law worked. But when you understand the law, then you're able to use it to bring forth the prayer reality of your dreams. Now, of course, in unity, what we know to be true is that we do have creative power in our world. And I've spent the last 5 or so minutes telling you all that there were 3 dots on this side and that there were 6 dots on the other. You see, we have manifested our reality. Because in the end, the more we focus on it, the more that reality comes to be. That's another talk for another time. I'm going to have to be really careful, or I am going to run through all of my stupid human tricks by Christmas. Anyway, the idea is that the more we can connect to divine law, the more we can understand how that works in our lives, the more effectively we can manifest the prayer consciousness we're trying to manifest. Now, what the Fillmores suggested that we do, and this is something that I have had great success with, is finding ourselves a reminder. Some way to connect our memory to an emotional memory of something that happened that reminded us of the spiritual truth. See, in their book, Teach Us to Pray, Charles and Cora Fillmore wrote about several divine laws, several spiritual laws, but the one that they felt was of utmost importance when it came to this idea of remembering that this is not magic, the one that they felt was of utmost importance was to remember, above all else, that God is your source. To remember that God is your source, that you have no other source other than God, Spirit, universe. By the way, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't care. The important thing is that you remember that your source comes from right here, not from out there. And when we remember that, and when we pray from that place of knowing that our source is right here, that's when we're really able to bring forth the things that we're desiring to bring forth. And so I mentioned the idea that if you can find something to remind you, an emotional memory of something to connect to that memory, that God is your source. That helps you to remember when you have one of those moments when you're triggered because you're walking through a world that's going to try to convince you not only that God is not your source, but that your source is that shiny new Tesla that looks really, really cool. And once you have that, everything's fine. Or that your source is the job or the relationship, the income. The more we can remember the truth, the more those things just kind of brush off your shoulder. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you are Star Wars fans. Where are my Star Wars nerds at? Thank you. Thank you for admitting, and I'm right there with you. In the last movie, The Last Jedi, after Luke comes out and they're trying to get, and he just kind of like brushes the dust off his shoulder after all of like the weapons have fired on him. He just kind of does this. When we remember spiritual truth, when we remember that God is our source, it doesn't matter what the world throws at you. You just can kind of brush that off your shoulder. So the Fillmore story, the story that Charles Fillmore connected the most with, was the story of the prodigal son. And I know there are so many of us that have used or seen that story, not used that story, but had that story used against us at some point in our life, right? Am I the only one that has ever heard the prodigal son story taught as, you are a lowly sinner and you should be so fortunate to have God allow you back into his good graces? I'm guessing several of you have heard that a few times. Well, in Unity, we like to look at the Bible metaphysically. And what that means is that we're looking at a spiritual meaning hidden beneath the story. And there are so many traditions that do this. Unity is one of them. But I'd like you to consider looking at the prodigal son story this way instead. You see, what if instead of being about returning to some mythical God that exists outside of you, what if the story is about what happens to us when we allow our consciousness to return to the place where it knows that God is our source, not anything out here around us, not the world around us, not the city that has all the lights and the shine. That's not our source. God is. And that source is always available for us. You see, we're able to shift that focus because when we look at the story that way, it moves beyond just a fable that Jesus told and becomes something that we can allow to have spiritual meaning in our lives if we choose to. You see, for Mr. Fillmore, it was the story of the prodigal son. That's what connected him to the reminder that God was his source. For me, it was the way that every time I needed some sort of income for my tuition to ministerial school and that tuition was due and I had to pay it, it was there. And every time I start to think, I don't know if I'm going to have enough, that story and those memories and that ability that I had to go in and hand that check to them reminds me that God is my source. See, I don't know what your story might be, but you have one. You've had some experience in your life of that reminder that, God is there. I'm okay. God is here. And that experience created an emotional response in your body. And every time you revisit that experience, that same emotional response comes up. And when we allow that emotional response to be the reminder that God is there, then we can set our prayers off on the right track. So that's going to be our work for this week as we prepare to go out into this week. It's going to be to take the time to remind yourself, to ground yourself in divine law and divine truth, in the divine knowing that God is your source and there is no other source in effect. There is only God. And that source will provide me with anything and everything that I need to be and express love in our world. Because after all, at the end of the day, isn't that what we're really here to do? Yeah, we still have time before kickoff. We can still applaud. That's what we're here to do. We're here to be and express love in our world. We're here to increase love in our world. And when we connect with that presence of God that knows that it is our source, when we are able to shift our focus from thinking that the things we need to be and express that love are out here, when we shift from that to knowing that they're right here, that's when we're able to truly unlock the presence of love, the presence of peace, the presence of all that we were called here to be into our world. Like I said, next week we're going to take a look at exactly how it is that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions and our mind works with that source to create the reality that we experience. But for now, just keep focusing on that truth within you, that God is your source, that spirit is your source, that the universe is your source, that the light within is your source. Whatever name you give it, know that it is within you and it is its good pleasure to give you the keys to the kingdom. Because you were born blessed. You were born holy. You were born sacred. You are nothing less than the light and love of God. Bless you on your journey. Namaste.